Hello. We have a very distinguished panel for you today. The Reps has a wonderful tradition of mounting a family-friendly play over the holidays, and that's taken many forms through the years. This year it was determined that the Rep would mount a production of A Christmas Story, which many people probably know best from the film from 1983. And the film itself was based upon material, books, as well as radio programs by a humorist, a radio personality by the name of Gene Shepard. But the movie, when it was first released, was a labor of love for the filmmaker, director Bob Clark. And Bob Clark had been friendly with Gene Shepard and became obsessed with Gene Shepard's work, listening to the radio program. Bob Clark had an art film classic hit in '81 called Porky's. That was it was enormously successful, and it gave him the ability to produce, direct this movie, which he had long dreamed of doing, A Christmas Story. It came out in Thanksgiving in 1983, and it was made for about $3 million and grossed about $19 million, but the reviews were not good. They were not good at all, and it was actually pulled from cinemas before Christmas. And then it sort of went, in hiding, and came back into view with the advent of Betamax and VHS. Anyone remember Betamax and VHS? When home video, you could, and suddenly it became this cult classic, and it has created legions of followers. This film. And I'll tell just a little story about when I was getting the title to my house here. I was in the title office, and the man who was doing the paperwork asked me, what's the Rep doing this year? And I said, we're doing Spamalot and Crucible and Christmas Story. And he stopped. That's my favorite movie. I thought, wow, I'm sort of more of a Citizen Kane guy myself, but more power to you. So it has this, especially amongst men, it has this incredible appeal. And I think there's many reasons why that is. It's a memory play, and it also is wrapped up around one's memory and the traditions. This time of year is so filled with traditions. So among our distinguished panelists, Dr. Juliana Flynn, on the end, in the Christmas Red, from the University of Arkansas in Little Rock. She's a cultural anthropologist, a professor of anthropology at UALR. She's written about how tradition can be used for strategic political purposes, with a focus mostly on Micronesia and the Pacific Islands, where islanders who might otherwise be treated as backwards assert themselves as a keeper of valued traditions others in the emerging nation have abandoned. But she's also written about traditional American dance, and she's a regular contributor on Being Human, the segments aired locally on public radio. And I thought it'd be wonderful to have her, if you don't mind, Dr. Flynn, talking a little bit about the values of traditions and memory and the relationship in memory and traditions.
Is this working? Okay. I was actually pleased to be asked. As an anthropologist, I'm too often greeted with the idea that all we do is study other people, other places, other times. We do that, but we do believe it's relevant for us here and now, and we actually do study the us here and now. And I'd actually argue that tradition is about us here and now. It's not really about the past. It's us here and now. But a lot of the strength of tradition and its ability to really evoke something emotional in us is because it's connected to so many things. I mean, it's clearly tied to our sense of identity. It ties us very often to community. It ties us to family. It often ties us to nation. It ties us to our history. It connects us, reminds us of shared beliefs, of shared values. It's often tied to place. When I was asked to do this, I ran across a little sticker and was reminded of a small tradition that we have with voting now. You know, you stick your piece of paper in that machine and you're given a little sticker that you're supposed to put on. And that's a tiny little thing, but think of what all that's connected with. From a distance, all you might see is red, white, and blue. But what does that evoke in you? There's the flag on it, bringing back stories of Betsy Ross, the number of stars that are on there. Wearing it, you're sending a symbol of being a citizen. At that point, it doesn't matter who you voted for. You are sending a message that you're a participant in one of these major traditions in our country. You're subtly signaling to other people what they ought to go do that day as well. And we're just talking about a little sticker and how much that evokes. I'd also argue that part of the strength of tradition has to do with, it involves ritual in one way or another, and rituals always involve some kind of symbols. Some of them involve place. If you think about all of our rituals involved with weddings, where you get married has symbolic significance. For most people, it's a church because of that value. But if people choose something else, it's usually for some important reason having to do with their personal history or their family history. If you think of the objects that are involved in traditions, the ring at the wedding ceremony, for example, that brings strong emotions and memories. Language with rituals. I'm old enough to remember a tradition in the Catholic Church involving Latin. And there was something very symbolic about using Latin, and there was real resistance to the idea of actually using the vernacular language because there was such emotion and memory attached to the Latin. And the behavior that's involved in rituals. Think about Thanksgiving dinner and some of these things. You think very carefully about where you are going to do it, okay? If you ordinarily just eat in the kitchen, this might be the occasion for going to the dining room. That's a special place. It has to be special for Thanksgiving. I know in my case, we think very carefully about the silverware. We bring out my mother's silverware, okay? So we've got the memories of all those past Thanksgivings, and the attachment to my mother, who's no longer with us. I pass it on to my son and daughter-in-law, and they had better bring it out when they have Thanksgiving dinner. There are special dishes. At least you know you're supposed to have turkey, even if you choose not to. And there's those connections to the past Thanksgivings that you've had. And obviously all the connections to our history. It evokes all of those stories that we've had about the pilgrims who came and their search for religious freedom, and a lot of what our country's values are supposed to be about. It's as simple as setting the table for Thanksgiving, that all of that is evoked. In another way, I'd argue traditions are powerful is, to a large extent, they help give us the sense that the world around us is meaningful. That the sheer act of doing traditions over and over again, and there's an annual cycle of them, there's this sense of predictability and rightness. And I was asking some people the other day what they thought were some rituals, and you could argue even something like Super Bowl Sunday. We have expectations around there, memories of having done it before, and it occurs at a certain time every year, so there's a certain predictability and a comfort. Some of them, I'd even argue, help give us a sense of control. You can probably tell that I'm not a native Arkansan after the first few sentences came out. And one of the Southern traditions that I learned when I came here had to do with eating black-eyed peas on New Year's Day so that we would have a year of good luck. Right? And there's the rational scientific part of me that says, oh yeah, good luck. But you better believe that every New Year's Day, I am going to have my black-eyed peas, right? And a lot of rituals do that, this sense of control and meaning. Clearly, traditions also function to knit people together, to knit communities together. We're reminded of ways in which we're similar. Even go back to that Thanksgiving example. We're thinking of Thanksgiving locally with our family, but we know that people around the country are doing the same thing more or less on the same day, and we are thinking about the values that we have in common and the histories that we have in common, even if we're not physically around people doing that. Obviously, traditions associated with 4th of July, it's the same thing. We may do them locally, we may do them with family, but they still bring people together. And sometimes they literally bring a community together. Think of the show, the fireworks that happen here in Little Rock. And I was looking at the paper at all the community tree lighting ceremonies that are going around town. They literally bring community together. So it's a time where we are reminded of what we have in common. And in the back of our minds, we remember those times that we have done it in the past, and assuming that our ancestors did it in the past. I'd argue, too, there's something in the performing of traditions. These are things that you do that involve doing something with your body over and over again, and you've got memories of that. Last night, I was thinking about that when I was putting ornaments on the Christmas tree. You know, there's that physical act of picking it up and then putting it on the tree that I've done year after year after year. So it's not just thinking about the tradition, but actually doing of it. And there are even little traditions wrapped around that tradition. There are certain ornaments that I put on the tree. My husband is not to touch those ornaments. And that's connected with our history, the things that were part of mine. Without him, I'm going to put those on the tree. He could put the ones on from his upbringing. I'm putting mine on. And then there are others where they're part of our history. And he has to stop what he's doing so I can go show him, okay, remember when we went to Alaska and we got this one? But, you know, we all have stories like that. And there is something in the doing it and using your body that helps evoke those memories of having done it over and over again in the past. Another aspect of tradition that I find intriguing is it can change. And it can still be called traditional. In anthropology, we don't see traditions as these things that are just unchanging from the past. It's our take on the past and what it means for us today. For example, most of us throw rice, or at least know about throwing rice at the weddings. And most of us think we know where that came from, but who knows how, when, and why it actually developed. But we throw rice at weddings. But it's a little more complicated because, again, and this is symbolic, a lot of people now are choosing not to throw rice. I've been to weddings where they blow bubbles or something like that because they don't like the consequences of, birds eating the rice? I'm not even sure why we're not supposed to do it anymore. But it's becoming traditional now to make the symbolic statement of not throwing rice, but you're going to throw something else, like the bubbles at the people. And you can deliberately break with tradition, but there's strength in that because you know what the tradition is. One of my brothers, I guess the best way I could describe him is sort of bohemian. He sees himself as this poetic type and not your traditional person. So when he got married, he deliberately made a choice not to wear traditional wedding garb. And I think he had one of those puffy sleeve shirts or something like that. But the power in that was people knew he was breaking with the tradition, and they could understand the new message that he was trying to send about being a particular type of non-traditional person. He also had himself rowed on a river up to an island where he met his bride. So there was even more symbolism evoked in that. I don't want to take too much of your time. I do want to say something about the play. I know when I first saw the movie, my husband and I hadn't heard about it, and we were just really taken with it. And it's something that has become a tradition in our family to watch that every year. So I'll just leave you with the idea of what do we get? What memories are evoked for us? What aspects of our heritage are we thinking about or are involved in that making it part of our tradition every year to watch A Christmas Story? Thank you.
This is a memory play, not unlike A Glass Menagerie, where you have a narrator looking back. And certainly so many of the memories are grounded in traditions. I'd like to specifically introduce you to our young actors. Max McCurdy, next to Dr. Flynn, is playing Randy Parker. And can you tell, it says actual brother next to him, it's Joe McCurdy. He plays Ralphie Parker. And then John Ottavino, next to Joe, is the grown Ralph. Can you see the family resemblance between? John Ottavino plays Ralphie as an adult, and he's the narrator. So Max's actually debut at the Rep was in A Christmas Carol. And, it was an elf. Joe was in Christmas Carol. And John Ottavino, this is the first time he's played the Rep. And one of the reasons I think we are so excited to have John with us is he grew up on Long Island and has very fond memories of listening to Gene Shepard stories on the radio. And I thought it was so interesting that you had never seen the movie before.
No. I don't need, can you hear me if I don't use this? No, I've never seen the movie. Oh, I need to use it. No, I've never seen the movie. Gene is the way that Elvis or the Beach Boys might be the soundtrack of some people's youth. Gene Shepard is the soundtrack of mine. He had a radio show in New York City on WOR, 710 on your dial. Every night, Monday through Friday, from 9 to 10, then a little break, and then 10 to 11. And the different years, it would either be 1 hour or both. And all he did in that hour was talk. He never talked, he didn't lecture, he didn't talk about politics or religion, he talked about human nature, but it wasn't academic. When I first got this job, when Mark called me and we agreed that I was going to do this, it was summertime, and I was talking to some of my friends from high school that I'm still friendly with, and they were all Shep fans too. And I said, "What did you like about Gene?" And they all said the same thing, same two things. One, that he always sounded like he was talking directly to me, and two, that he knew everything. And he was like the best big brother you could have, because he was cluing you in to what was really going on. So in his family's life, he'd let you know what was going on underneath. And there was a cast of characters, and he had a tremendous following. He got into an argument with his station manager one day, and they were arguing that he needed to change this, because he used to make fun of the commercials as he played them. And you can't do that anymore, and you couldn't even sell soap. So he went on the air that night, and he said, "Friends, I need you to do something." And he found this one brand of soap, this real small little manufacturer. He said, "I need you all to go out tomorrow and buy 1 bar of this soap." And it vanished from the shelves of the tri-state area overnight. You couldn't find it anymore. And then another time, someone got irritated. He got him irritated, and he says, "This is what I need you to do. I need you to go out with a felt tip marker, and when you're in the subway, or you're at a bus stop, or anywhere, very small, in clear print, just write the words, 'Flick lives.' That's all. Flick lives." And I remember walking down the block of my town and turning the corner, and on this corner of this beautiful granite building, and I turn, and there it says, "Flick lives." So that's who Gene was. He would get on at 10, I would finish my homework by 10 o'clock, hop into bed, turn on the radio, and he would talk to me directly for the next hour. And I've never seen the movie, partially because all of the stories that are in the movie I heard first. And so I have them in my head. And I don't want to see someone else's version of them. I like my version of them. And that's how I grew up with Gene Shepard.
So we're so fortunate to have director Mark Shanahan with us. He's a man of many talents. He's a wonderful actor, wonderful director, playwright, teacher, expert on Alfred Hitchcock. And last year he directed Peter and the Starcatcher. So Mark, these stories started as radio reminiscence, and then they were published as books, and then the books were made into a film, and then the film was made into a play, and then the play was made into a musical. And I know one of the things that you're interested in is how you tell stories through different mediums. And I'm wondering if you can describe, everyone in this room could go home and watch 24 hours of A Christmas Story on TNT. They start playing at December 24th, and they play it all the way through Christmas. Why should they come to the Rep to see the same story on stage?
I think it's particularly. I love the question in a way because it's right in the title of A Christmas Story. It suggests there are a lot of Christmas stories. This is a Christmas story. So everyone who celebrates Christmas has a Christmas story. And I hope that our play ends up letting people on their way home get in their cars and drive and say, what was my best Christmas present? What was my favorite Christmas? And I do love the fact that, I've listened to the Shepherd radio broadcast, which has all the characters that you know from the film, but it's really evocative to read it. I've heard his radio broadcast of it as well, the way he describes things, and you can see it in your imagination. And of course, I remember seeing the film when it first came out. My mom and my grandmother took me to see it, and thinking it was funny and great. But my mother was watching it, laughing at memories of Little Orphan Annie on radio, and that was a time where she grew up, so she was enjoying it. We now have people coming to this play who might know of it from the film, and so they're nostalgic for the film, which was nostalgic for the 1940s, right? So now we're nostalgic for nostalgia. It's a whole other ball of wax. But what's really beautiful is that the story is told differently, and whether it's in print or on the radio, or in the film, or the play version, or the musical version, that means this story can be told in so many different ways, as all good stories can be. Sit around your table this holiday and tell stories of your family, and everyone will have a different version of that story, or at least certainly mine has that happen. And I think what we have going for us is that people will show up thinking they know the play, thinking they know this story from maybe being exposed to the film. But what I love is our play is really a theatrical event. It's something you can only experience in the theater. We tell it a very particular way. And the theater, to me, feels more special than it ever has been I feel very lucky to make my living in it, because I feel now it is the last non-downloadable thing you can do. You go and you sit in that room with several hundred other people in the dark and share an experience that you cannot get from turning on the TV on December 20 whatever and putting it on a loop and letting it play like there's music in the background and just picking out your favorite moments from a story you think you know. Instead, I sat in the back last night at one of our previews, and I eavesdropped at intermission, as I do if you see me in the lobby, hearing what works and what we think we need to work on and things like that while we still have rehearsal time left. And people weren't saying, oh, I love the thing about the lamp, I love this or that. They were talking about the sound of the radio, that music. Oh, isn't it wonderful to remember our house? They were talking about things much like our discussion about tradition. They were talking about things that are meaningful to them. In our play, the shepherd character is played by John, who is a narrator, and he basically is the Gene Shepherd character, even though his name is Ralph Parker in the play. And the thought of doing a play, which is a memory play about a guy who wants to go back in time, essentially, and be back in his house at a certain year, the year before perhaps he grew up, the year when his parents are right in the prime of their lives raising their children. I have a 7-year-old daughter. And at the holidays, we are often reminded of people who aren't there with us anymore. And it's a very beautiful thing, I think, to use the holidays and use this play to tell the story of someone who gets to go back and experience being with people he loves one more time, and maybe remind us that we can all do that, in a sense.
I personally have somewhat mixed feelings about the film, and I think to a good degree, because of Mark's work and the cast's work, I am finding so much more in this play. It's hilariously funny, but there's something that's very moving to me about the connection of memory and recalling those who have gone before. So you were talking about nostalgia, and I think one of the challenges is you have a lot of young actors in the play, and nostalgia for them is very different than nostalgia for us. And what is it? How is it working with actors whose frame of reference is so completely different than ours?
Well, one of the things we try to do in the play is to make it unlike the film, that you see things set up in front of you. You see the world created by the actors, created by the characters, so it's a very theatrical event. Now, while you're dealing with guys who are splitting their time between school and rehearsal, so they must be very tired, I often realize that, yeah, this is a story about a guy remembering when he was a kid, but how do you as a director turn to kids and tell them, no, I don't think an 11-year-old would do that, or, oh, I don't think a 14-year-old. I mean, they know a little bit more about what it's like to be their age right now than I do, but I certainly remember probably being worse behaved and more mischievous than these two young gentlemen are. And so it's been really wonderful in some regard to introduce the idea, and our play, as I say, is, in the theater we say, try to make your imaginary circumstances real. And who has better imaginations than these kids who come in and can fully inhabit the thought that this is 1940? Sure, what's 1940? And we tell them, well, when you take a picture, you don't look at the back of the camera, that there's no iPhones or iPads, there's a radio, and that's it. And they create this world with us. And they have been remarkably resilient in the face of the obstacles of our hours and our direction and all that they get, and have reminded us, the adults making it, that really great acting comes from that sense of a child at play and never losing that sense. And so it's been fantastic to have kids in the cast in that regard.
So Joe, you're playing this iconic role, this role that everyone knows. Is it a little, and you've done plays before, of course, but is it a little intimidating? Is it a little scary to be the center of attention? And, it's all about you and your experiences at a certain point in your life.
Yes, it is a little bit scary, but once you get into the ease of doing the show, it feels natural. You feel embodied. I feel like I'm actually Ralphie Parker in the show. Well, I am, but so I feel that I am the character in real life. So
Right. And so it must be hard, and I'm sure all of you know the story. So there's a scene towards the end of the play, you come out in this costume that the audience thinks is hilarious. But of course, Ralphie is dying 1,000 deaths. I mean, he hates being that costume. Is it hard? An actor's job is, of course, to live in the moment as Ralphie would feel. So he's miserable being in that costume. He's miserable. He hates being that clothes. And you have 350 people laughing at you. Is that hard not to laugh?
yes, it is. I'm a very smiley person, and to try not to laugh during this moment is a challenge for me, but I've found something in my brain that I think about, and then when I think about it, it makes me not smile.
Yeah.
So
it's really important, right? Because you're taking us on this journey, and so much of the time, honestly, he's not having a good time. He's struggling, right? But you also have to be very positive. It's a role where he has a lot of positive energy. So you're struggling, and yet you're the little guy who can, right? You're like the train. Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Right? But you're going up this hill. Yeah, I can imagine that's difficult.
Right.
What's it like working with your brother?
it feels natural being with my brother, because if anybody else was Randy, I think it wouldn't be as natural. It wouldn't have felt as natural as it does now to me.
Right.
If I wasn't working with my brother. So.
Hey, this is the big question I got for you, Max. Do you like oatmeal?
Yes.
Good. That's a good thing, because oatmeal is a very big part of Randy Parker's world, right?
Yep.
Is it fun to get, because in the play you have to do things that you wouldn't get away with doing at home, right? I mean, you get to make messes and you get to play with your food, and is that fun?
Yes, it really is.
And what's it like? You have these two actors who aren't your mom and dad, and yet in the play they've got to be mom and dad. How did you maneuver that? How did you make that happen for you?
Okay, so I know, I make friends easily. So on the first day, I made friends with these, my mom and my dad. And so it was really easy for me to like connect, like as if they're really my mom and my dad.
Right. Yeah. And they're really fun to work with, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah. I think the adult actors. There's 4 adult actors in this play, and they've been wonderful. John and Claire, and Justin, Rosemary have been so great with us. There's 7, aren't there? 7 young actors involved, and then 3 understudies. We have 3 understudies. The young actors have understudies. And does it, Mark, when you're working with adults and kids, do you have to work with them differently? Because you have incredibly seasoned actors. John, I know, has performed in 97 professional productions in what does this say? My glasses, 36 states and 7 countries. So this is a man who knows his way around the stage, and yet you have some actors who have limited experience, and you have all of 2 weeks and 2 days to get to the point where they can go on stage.
A lot of the preparation for making a play comes in the months leading up to that first rehearsal, and then you get into a rehearsal and say, thank God we're here, finally, we can make this happen. But, you have to figure out how to speak to every actor a little bit differently and make sure that everyone gets on the same page so they seem to be in the same place when the audience comes. It's a cohesive experience. But I quickly realized that first night meeting our young company, when I came down here to audition them in May, I was very worried that by November they would look entirely differently and have hit puberty and had lower voices and, I want a BB gun for Christmas. But the truth of the matter is I really felt that it would be important, and I don't know if you guys appreciate this or not, to speak to them as adults. Speak to them. You never should talk down to someone from their experience anyway. They have their own experience. And treat them as the professional actors just the way I was treating the adults. So we talk about what the scenes are about, where you're coming from, where you're going to, what your intention is behind your line, and not pull any punches, because I think if we tried to just go out there and put some kids on stage and say, oh, that's cute, we would do a disservice to the idea that we're trying to tell a really great story. It is really nice that we have such professional and wonderful actors, most of whom I've worked with before, and John and I shared a dressing room in New York doing a play a couple of years ago. And, there is something great about passing along. It's such an ephemeral experience, because when the curtain comes down and the play is over, and you move on to the next one. But passing along the experiences you have, as people had done to me, and letting you know it's not just no stage left and stage right and upstage and downstage, but to how you think about stories and storytelling. And these young guys, all of whom are from Arkansas schools, and some of whom knew each other, some of whom just got to know each other, they have shown up ready to go. And that has made all the difference in making sure that with such a short rehearsal time, that essentially a short rehearsal time, that we got a product that we were proud of on stage in a short process.
If I can add too.
Yeah.
I have a lot of friends in New York who, my kid would like to be an actor. Where do I do? What do I do? Da, da, da. And I always say the same thing. If your kid is 6 and sets foot on a film set with me, we have the same job. They are grown up. They have to show up on time, be ready, know what they're doing, tolerate the pressure, handle the boredom, fight through the frustration. So the kids are professionals because they have the same professional burden that anyone would have if they went into any of your professions.
May I make one other?
Please.
I just am coming in to do the show, but if anyone has deep checkbook, I will tell you, and you're looking for a donation at the holidays, the Rep has an incredible arts education program and theater program for young people, but all the way up to adults taking classes, and that's unbelievable. And a lot of these kids came through the education program, and you can tell that it has helped them get ready to do it. And I think it's so important. You see it all around the country, that the theater, nonprofit theaters have been picking up the mantle to have arts education, and kids flock to it. We see them coming through the doors and they find their way to the theater, and if they get there, they might stay active and compassionate, involved in the arts for life. So I put that out there, that we got lucky that the Rep has a good arts education program.
I think one of the things I like so much about Mark's production is that the narrator, the role John plays, the adult Ralph, is more active in terms of the memories than in many other productions. And that's one of the key differences between the film, where you just have a voiceover, and the stage, where you actually see the transformation of the adult Ralphie over the course of an evening as he reminisces and remembers those traditions and relives those moments and reconnects with his mom and dad who are long gone. It's extremely moving. So you have to have two sort of realities going, John, right? The narrator he takes the audience by the hand and says, here, come with me. I want to tell you a story. And then he moves into the story and becomes an active player. It's a really interesting, and you do it so beautifully.
Well, thank you.
Reviews are in.
Thank you. You know, I had an experience about 4 or 5 years ago. I went to my 40th, my 40th high school reunion. And we all have name tags on, and this one guy walks by and he looks at me, and he doesn't have a name tag on, the little rat. And he comes over and he goes, "Do you remember me?" And I went, "Oh, no." And I went through the Rolodex, flipped, and I said, "No, man, I'm sorry, I don't." And he goes, "Hi, I'm John Aker. He was my girlfriend's 7-year-old brother." And of all the young ladies that I knew in my life growing up, I knew where all of them were, except for Beth, his sister. And I went, "How's Beth?" Blah, 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 blah. And he picked up the phone, he dialed the number, and he said, "Talk to her." So I spent the next 45 minutes talking to my wife, sitting over there going, "What are you doing? Who are you talking to?" Never mind. And all of a sudden that triggered, and I was 16 again. And that memory thing, that's what, that very thing where, you know, there I am at the time, 56. But I was 56 and I was 16 for those 45 minutes simultaneously. So that's what's going on here. And I also, I look for places in the play where something, like there's a moment where they've gone Christmas shopping and Dad sneaks in and hides the presents. And I see that. And I'm trying to play a moment of, that's where he put them. Oh, I never knew that. So I'm always looking for things that in the past, as the narrator, that I didn't know. So I'm finding things, one of the other ones is when the glasses come in, when Esther Jane returns. There was a fight, and he lost his glasses, and this young lady brings the glasses and gives them to his mother. Now, he didn't see, in Ralphie's life, he didn't see that scene. So the older Ralph, even though I wrote the story, I'm seeing that for the first time. I didn't know that I'm seeing it as this, I knew the young lady did this, but I didn't know how she did it. And I didn't know what that room was like when she did it. So that's sort of, I get to ride that wave too, even though it's all the other actors doing it. I just get to watch, and I'm stealing their thunder.
It's so fun that you're the narrator, but you play a variety of roles. And there are fantasy sequences, and then there are the reality sequences. And can you tell me a little bit, Joe, about, is there a difference in when you're working you're working in one reality, and then you go into your imagination, and you become a different character? How do you accomplish that?
Well, it's the same thing as actually coming to the theater and or in the show, you're becoming a different character. It's basically, you're doing that, but another time. So I feel like I just have to do what I've been doing for Ralphie, but just 10 times better for my fantasy scenes.
Great. And one of the things, actors are so lucky when they have a supportive physical production. I think when you put on the clothes of a certain character, it can actually have an enormous effect on your physical presence. If you think about what the dresses of the women, what they were wearing then, and or if you're doing period pieces, and how did corsets actually affect your breathing and your stance and the way you walked? And I think one of the great things is we have some wonderful production values here, and I think the clothes must go a long way, don't they? I mean, what do you think, Max, when you're wearing the clothes of Randy? Do you feel any differently?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, and how does it make you feel?
It makes me feel like Randy. Like I feel like back in the 80s, like wearing those big snowsuits.
Right.
The old days, the 80s.
The old days. Right.
And like I know what it feels like to be in the past.
Right.
And like there's no TVs back then, so
No.
like it's just like really cool.
Yes, it's because you're in this different world, aren't you?
Yes.
And the world. And I think one of the things that's so fascinating about this story, or any story that withstands the test of time, there are things that never change. You know, human nature never changes. Sometimes I think we'd like it to change a little more than it does. But I mean, in terms of family relationships, and in terms of some of the deeper parts of being human are the same now, which is why we can look at this play and we identify with the play, because we are experiencing the same things, but the clothes are different and the world is different. And there's something, going back to Dr. Flynn's point, it's the traditions are not about before, they're about now, but they help land now in a way that's profound. And I think this play addresses that really beautifully. So I think we have probably time for a few questions. Yes? Yes?
Mike is covered too.
I would like to know the ages of you two young men, and what was the challenge for each of you? What was the biggest challenge in these roles?
I am 10 years old, and the biggest challenge of this is dealing with my brother.
Okay, it's your turn now, Joe.
I'm 13, and the biggest challenge I have is actually feeling like I'm in the 1940s, because I've grown up with all this technology, and back then they had radios and really, really weird cars. So that was one of my biggest challenges.
Sure.
My question is also for the two young men, and I'm just curious what is it about theater that you find attractive, or why is it something that you want to do?
One of my favorite things about doing theater is you get to embody another character, and you get to feel what they feel and do what they do, and you don't have to feel like people are judging you. So
Mine is that I get to know new people. And even though that these characters are all friends, some people don't know that we're really, really close. Like, take Schwartz. Me and Schwartz are really close friends right now. And in the play, they're really close too. So we're both, I guess, connected.
Great.
I'm interested in knowing what inspired you guys to, were you in art education or art education class, or did a certain teacher inspire you, or?
Well, we've always grown up in a theater family because my dad works at the Rep and my sister just got done with Crucible. And yes, we both of Max and I did theater classes right before the show started, and it really helped us. So
the lessons that the teacher taught us helped me. The teacher's name was Miss Anna, and she taught us how to connect to the audience and show them what it's like to be where you are, in the 1940s. You're there, but not there.
Part of the fun of being an audience member with live theater is knowing that anything could happen or something could go wrong. In this particular show, is there one particular moment where it's tricky, where something could go wrong, so we can watch for it?
I think this might will get wrong maybe one of these days, will be the time where I dress up in the snowsuit. I think one of these times I am going to mess up my cue, get my leg in the wrong slot, and I have to change out and then go back in.
If you're looking for a disaster, you have the right play. There's 43 scenes. I think at last count it's 897,000 costumes, 4 million props, light cues, sound cues. I talked to Mark in the summer, and I went, "Are you using kids in this play?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "You know how hard the tech for this play is going to be?" He said, "Yeah." But the other part of your question is, my construct for this is that I have invited this audience to a party at my house. And my job is to give them the best gift I can. And as a storyteller, the only thing I have to give them is a good story. But I am fighting constantly to make a relationship with the audience and very specific moments. Now, we had an audience 2 nights ago that was very different from the audience last night. They laughed at different things. So that's part of the challenge that I have, is trying to make that connection earlier that is very personal between us. And if you come as an audience member, you do have a line. So you have a line. You just don't know you have it yet. It will become clear when it's time what your line is, and if you don't deliver it on time, I'm going to give you the hairy eyeball. Just saying. So be prepared.
I just realized that you are my worst nightmare. I learned something about the theater right now, which is you have come hoping that my show falls apart. The set will fall over, a kid will freeze and forget his lines, the sound and light, and that's what you hope will happen, because it will be funny, I promise you, if it does. I will cry, but you'll laugh. But isn't that also the great thing? I kind of love that you feel this way, because, yeah, if you push play on something, you don't get that feeling. But to sit in a room and know that these people are doing it for you, with you, at the same moment, and yes, anything could happen. I guess that's the whole point of going. Anything could happen, and we've had it planned out, but the truth is every night it does change, and whether it's because things are going right or wrong, we just deal with it on stage and survive it as best we can, but enjoy that sense of spontaneity. And that's the great joy of having a party 8 times a week for John to throw. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Oh, yes, please.
To add on to Mark's remark, it's our jobs as actors to make it look like it wasn't a mistake. Because last night I accidentally knocked over a potted plant, and luckily, Max here was smart enough to act quickly after the scene was over. So it's our job not to make it look like it was a mistake.
And I dropped the line last night, and he saved it.
And I sneezed at exactly the wrong moment in the audience and ruined his laugh, by the way. I ruined my own play.
So before we say goodbye, I would love to just, oh, sorry, one more question, yes?
I had a question. As an actor, do you see the people in the audience? I've always wondered if you see the people in the audience, like if you see someone you know, how do you avoid making eye contact or waving or grinning or whatever?
The thing about it is just don't think they're there. It's just like a blank of no audience, and just think it's all just the actors performing to nobody. And when they but for John, he's talking to the audience, not to the actors, to me and Joe.
Yes, one more, and then we'll wrap it up
Yes,
here.
much of the story revolves around Ralphie's obsession with getting a BB gun for Christmas, and I just wanted to ask the two young men there if in their life away from the theater they have ever owned a BB gun, or as in preparation for the role where they handed one for an afternoon of shooting to get some experience with one.
So before I got the news that I was Ralphie, my dad and I went to the Bass Pro Shop in Memphis, because we were in Memphis at the time, and I said to my dad, if I get the part, you have to buy me a Red Ryder BB gun. And he still hasn't.
Great. So because so much of our holidays are wrapped up around family traditions and stories of the past, our audience engagement director and her team have come up with this fantastic partnership with StoryCorps. And we're inviting audience members to come to the theater. There are 2 booths. They will be open an hour before the show starts. And the invitation is for you to come with a partner, with a family friend, with a child, with a neighbor, and tell your personal Christmas story. And those will be collected and sent to StoryCorps, and then they will be saved as Arkansas Christmas stories at the Library of Congress. So we invite all of you to come a little bit early and remember what your Christmas story is, and bring someone along and share your story so it can be saved for future generations. So thank you very much, and so pleased you're with us. Thanks to the panel.